You could just have a situation where who's buying gold? Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, even our friends like Japan, Philippines, Mexico. They're buying all the gold. There's not that much around. It wouldn't take much to cause a buying panic. By the way, we've seen all of this before, from the panic of Black Friday, 1869, and what they used to call gold points in the early 20th century. But yeah, first of all, I applaud the president and Elon Musk if they're going to Fort Knox. I think that's great. I think it'll be, I call it the mother of all photo ops. But if you've ever lifted a 400-ounce bar, they weigh 27 pounds. I've done it. I've been in vaults, but it's like a free weight. It's it's a lot heavier than you think. But they'll go in, they'll look around. By the way, the gold is certainly there. I've said that for over 10 years, probably 20 years, but I said it in my book, The New Case for Gold. The gold is there. Just think about it. Would the Treasury let the president go to Fort Knox if the gold wasn't there? Of course they wouldn't. So they're going to go there. The gold is there. Well, here's the thing. Blythe Masters, who ran global commodities for J.P. Morgan for a very long period of time, she knows more about this than anyone. She's left the bank and on to other things. She had a quote, just a couple words, and I found it on the internet. I verified it, but then it kind of disappeared. It got scrubbed. But she said, "Gold never settles." And what that means is that the amount of paper gold transactions, gold futures, gold forwards, unallocated gold, leasing gold, etc., the amount of paper transactions is easily 100 times, probably more, no one knows the exact number, but easily 100 times the amount of physical gold. Now, what she meant was, as long as all the longs and the shorts and the lessees and the lessors and the paper gold holders and everything kind of roll over their contracts, some get in, some get out, it's all good. But if you actually had a situation where the holders of those who were long the paper gold say, I think I'll take physical delivery. Call the CME or call the COMEX or call the Treasury for that matter. Call anybody. Say, deliver the gold, please. You couldn't do it. It would be physically impossible. So what would happen then? You'd have the greatest short squeeze in history. You'd have a mad scramble for physical gold. The price would double probably overnight and then just kind of keep going from there. You'd have bankruptcies as various dealers and counterparties failed. Now, that hasn't happened yet on that scale. And again, 1869 was the last time something like it happened. But the market couldn't stand up to it. Now, we're starting to see signs of that. We're starting to see cracks in the structure. And the question I have for the president, Elon Musk, go to Fort Knox, okay, the gold's there, that's fine. Ask the Treasury, and they probably don't want to ask this, is that gold leased? Is that gold leased to J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs? Well, it is. But if I lease my house to you, you can move in. It's perfectly legal, but I still own the house. Now, people don't understand gold leasing. They hear the gold is leased. They assume that like J.P. Morgan backs up a truck and takes the gold. No, that's not what happened. The gold is there. The Treasury owns it. I want to be clear about that. The gold is there, and the Treasury owns it. But they can lease it out. That's a paper transaction. And here's the key: when you're the lessee, again, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, any of the big banks, you have a right of rehypothecation. That means you can lease it to somebody else, or you can sell it to somebody else on what's called an unallocated basis, which is say, yes, Steve, you own the gold, but not really. There are no bars with serial numbers with your name on it, but it's a paper gold transaction. But that's my point. It's a long chain of paper transactions. Everybody thinks, every lessee, every buyer of unallocated gold thinks they own gold, and they do have price exposure, but they don't have the gold. The gold's in the vault where it belongs. But you can actually make money leasing. How could you blame the Treasury for, picking up a percentage point or two on the gold by leasing that? But the bigger point, the one you refer to, is that the chain of paper gold is 100 times the physical gold. You couldn't possibly settle all those transactions. Now, by the way, I understand gold leasing. I just described it. I don't know for a fact that the Treasury gold is leased. I suspect it is. I don't know that. To me, it's a question, but it's a question that the Treasury may not want to answer. Sure. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank had about 3% of their deposits were FDIC insured. The rest of them were completely uninsured. So you're basically, as a depositor, you're an uninsured creditor of an insolvent institution. So that's exactly right. Except fractional banking, they at least require maybe 5 up to 10% capital in different flavors, and the rest is leverage. We're talking about a market with maybe 1%, probably less. In other words, leverage 99 to 1. And that is the issue. Now, even in just take the futures exchanges, the COMEX, gold futures contracts, they have a vault and there's physical gold in it. And if I'm long a futures contract, I'm allowed to put in notice and say, I'd like to take physical delivery. But I'm enough of a geek. I've read the rule books of all these exchanges. They all have a rule in the rule book that says we can change the rules. And they tell you we are not a source of supply. So they just let you take physical delivery just a little bit to keep everything honest. But if there were ever a massive wave of notices, hey, I'd like to take physical delivery, they would say trade for liquidation only. You're not getting that gold. You're not getting that physical gold. There is not enough. That's just the futures market. Then again, there's unallocated gold, bank gold, gold leasing. This huge market, and this is what Life Masters meant when she said gold never settles. Well, I think my experience as a kid may be similar to yours, because at the kitchen table, my father used to pull two $20 bills out of his wallet, and he slammed them on the table and said, look at this. And one of them said Federal Reserve note, which is a liability. That's what we call money is actually a liability of the Federal Reserve. It's not an asset. But the other one said silver certificate. He used to carry it around. And he would say, this isn't backed by anything. My father was in the First Marines. He was actually in the occupation of China. He fought in World War II, but he was in the occupation of China. And they had a hyperinflation there that was worse than Weimar. Again, he say his Marine buddies, they would take a wheelbarrow full of national Chinese money to get a case of beer. So I had this from like a very early age, the difference between solid money and paper money and leverage. And again, the leverage system works as long as no one challenges it, as long as no one questions it. But the minute you do, it collapses very quickly, and that's where gold stands up. And I mean, gold would skyrocket in these scenarios. It's very hard, but the best example was September 1869. This is two of the so-called robber barons, Jay Gould and Big Jim Fisk, and they decided to corner the market. Now, there was a lot of gold. They were in New York. They did basically corner the physical gold supply in New York, but there were two sources of gold that they had to worry about. One was London, but they weren't really worried about that because you had to physically ship it to the United States. That would take weeks or longer, and they knew that would not come in time to break the corner. The other source of gold was the United States Treasury. The U.S. Treasury had gold, and they had a station in New York. So what they did, they had a middleman who was President Grant's son-in-law, and he loved his daughter. So they got an audience with President Grant. They convinced the president that high commodity prices were good for farmers. So Grant kind of naively said, yeah, you're right. He ordered the Treasury to stop selling gold. That was the green light, because once they knew the Treasury gold was off limits, the London gold couldn't get here in time. They had cornered the gold market in New York, so they launched the squeeze, which basically means you've sold gold on paper, you don't have it, so you're short. You go to buy it, but there isn't any because they've cornered the market. So this went on for a couple of days, and the price of gold skyrocketed. Finally, Sam Brown, Brown Brothers Harriman, the original Brown Brothers Harriman, called the Treasury, said, you got to do something. This is out of control. People are going broke. And they called the president. Then he told the Treasury Secretary, sell the gold. That broke the corner. But the point is, you really do have to control it all physically. The problem with the Hunt brothers, they pretty much cornered the silver market, but they were relying on the futures exchange. And the futures exchange at the time, as I said, changed the rules and said no physical delivery in the market. You can only trade for liquidation only. So it's hard to do. But here's the point: you don't need a good old fashioned corner. You can just have a situation where who's buying gold? Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, even our friends like Japan, Philippines, Mexico. They're buying all the gold. There's not that much around. It wouldn't take much to cause a buying panic.